Today, let's talk about how to calibrate your coffee. Understand, like online on social media, we can always find different methods as to or a different approach to how you can calibrate your coffee. And the first step is always to be able to assess your coffee, whether is it under or over extracted. And based on that information, you can then adjust the different variables that you have to make your coffee taste better. However, I personally have a very different approach. I think first thing first is to be able to understand what are the variables that it's in our control. What are the variables that we can change and make a difference to in our cup. But before that, if you have missed out the last episode as to how to assess your coffee, you can actually watch it over here. Step 1 of your calibration of coffee. You must first be able to identify what are the variables that you can actually play with. Number 1, the type of dripper or brewing equipment that you plan to use, followed by your dose, your brew ratio, contact time, grind size, temperature, and your water allocation. Your water allocation should cover the number of pours, your pouring height, your pouring style, things like that. But today, we will not focus on the different types of dripper. We'll just look at other different variables that we have, and we'll cover the types of dripper next time. The first variable I would like to talk about is dose. So, why dose is the first variable that I want to talk about? Because this is actually the anchor variable to all the different other variables that you can play with. So I'll give you one good example. So in this dripper right over here, I have 10 grams of coffee. This one, I have 30 grams. Visually, we can already tell the difference between the coffee bead height that is sitting inside this dripper itself. So first thing first that will be affected is the contact time. Okay, you're going to spend a lot less time in this dripper right over here as compared to this one. And the amount of water that you need to add in, it's also different. So therefore, I highly recommend you not to touch your dose. Always stick to the same dose unless you have no choice left. Like for example, if you have your usual dose is 15 grams and you have 16 grams of coffee left, then I highly recommend you to do 16 grams. But what you can do here to overcome is you can go with a coarser grind size. So this will help to reduce the total connect time when it comes to brewing. And another important factor why the dose would influence everything is actually also the total surface area that's exposed for your brewing. Okay, imagine you have so much more coffee right here. Your total surface area for coffee will be a lot larger as compared to this one over here. Unless left no choice, don't touch your dose. Next one would be water allocation. Water allocation would be a lot more complicated than it seems to be, but I'll do my best. So every time when I want to dive deeper into the different variables that I can control, I will think of extreme example. So what I'm going to do here is I prepared 15 grams of coffee each in each dripper, and I'll do one with just one pour, and then the other one I'll split them into 5 pours. Now we are done brewing. I have 2 different brews right here. One is done with a single pour. The total contact time is about 1 minute, and the other one is done with 5 pour. The total connect time will be about like 1 minute 48 seconds. So clearly we observe that by changing the number of pours will also affect the total connect time for brewing. This will also impact the acidity, the flavor profile, and the aftertaste of the coffee. So I give a general guideline here. For washed coffee, I will recommend at least 4 pours. And I'll put the recommended recipe right over here. And for natural anaerobic, I will recommend 3 pours and recommended recipe right over here. You can use this as your general guideline to kickstart. So let me share with you what do I actually taste in the cup. So for this, the acidity will be more towards like citric. The intensity will be more like medium to medium low. And let's go for the other one. For this, I think the flavors are more pronounced. The acidity is pretty much the same. I would say it's the same intensity, but I actually get a new acid in it. I actually taste malic as well. With all this in mind, you can actually calibrate your coffee as accordingly when it comes to the water allocation. But water allocation is actually a lot more complicated. I can't explain everything in this video. Let's look forward to one day, maybe we will touch on water allocation. That includes like your pouring height, your pouring style, the number of pours, things like that. I say it's a very wide spectrum, like a crazy topic, I would say. Yeah. Next variable, grind size. Well, I prepared two different grind size here, using the EK right behind me. One is ground at a EK 3.0, as you can see, super fine. You probably wouldn't use this grind size for brewing. And the other one is EK 13. But for better understanding and when it comes to help you to better understand grind size as a variable, I'm going to use these two extreme examples. So what does grind size affect? So number one, it will impact the body and the mouthfeel of your coffee. I give you one good example. If you pick up dryness in your coffee, I would suggest for you to actually change your grind size. How does it happen? Okay, the mouthfeel that we get from our coffee is actually because of the coffee oil. So how do you actually extract more coffee oil? Definitely you can change your filter paper. This could be one. And the other one is actually the amount of coffee oil that you manage to extract into your cup itself. So how does that work? Imagine if you are brewing coffee with such a coarse grind size. The water is actually washing the surface area of the coffee over and over again. And if it's too coarse, the water doesn't have time to go into the coffee grounds itself. You will be extracting with the same surface area over and over again. So that is actually what causes dryness. I understand that when the coffee is dry, based on what information we have online, is the coffee is over-extracted. Yes, it is over-extracted. It's because we are extracting with the same surface area over and over again. I wouldn't recommend you to go coarser. In fact, you should go finer. What it does is, first, it slows down the water flow while it goes through the coffee bead, increasing the contact time. Secondly, when you get a larger surface area, it's easy for you to get more coffee oils into your brew. So that will help you with your body. So therefore, when you come across a dry cup, you can actually consider to change your grind size instead. What it actually impacts is definitely also your aftertaste and sweetness. Once again, let's go back into the total amount of surface area that you have. The larger surface area, you're able to get more flavors. You're also able to get more sweetness out of it. But of course, at some point, it will taste bitter and intense. And this brings us to our next variable, brew ratio. So brew ratio will definitely impact your body, the aftertaste, as well as the flavor. And let me share with you how does brew ratio play such an important role in your cup. One good example that I like to use, you can always think about 1:10 versus 1:20. You can imagine your brew to be really watery and light body because you're introducing a lot more water when you're using 1:20. And in contrast, 1:10 will be much heavier. So if you are tasting a very heavy, compact cup, when you feel that all the flavors are all squeezed together and it's hard for you to pick them up one by one, that's how we would usually describe a coffee like as compact. You can actually consider to increase your brew ratio by adding in more water. It's easier for you to pick up the flavors. A good standard to start with would be 1:15. And the next one would be the aftertaste. Let's use 1:5 and 1:15 as an example. When using 1:5, you are only introducing this amount of water as compared to 1:15, it will be a lot more. So by adding more water, you are extracting more coffee into your cup. That being said, you are bringing in and introducing more flavors into your coffee as well. So this is how you will actually impact your aftertaste and of course flavor. So what I usually like to do, you can always brew your coffee and split them up into different ratio. Two ways. One, you can use a dual weighing scale. You can put a spoon right underneath your dripper and taste it at the different parts when you're brewing. Or you can do a full brew of 1:50. Remove your dripper and then you cut as accordingly. This one, Kenneth will find a way to shoot it. So by doing that, you can actually pick up what are the flavors that will be introduced into your coffee as you are adding in more water. So this is how you can play around when it comes to brew ratio. Okay, contact time. As we have discussed earlier on, there are a few variables that will actually indirectly or directly impact your contact time. One would be your dose, the other one would be your grind size, and all these variables would actually affect your overall extraction, how the coffee is gonna taste like. It's gonna impact the body and the overall sweetness of your coffee itself. For some coffee, it actually does better with immersion. It requires a longer contact time for you to immerse to get the flavors out of it. This is also because of the cellular structure of the coffee itself. How easy is it for the water to get into the coffee? And also it depends on the solubility of the roast profile. With all this in mind, you can actually make the changes to increase or decrease the contact time. Okay, so in this example that we have, we are using two different grind size. One is at EK3 and the other one is at EK13. So what's going to happen is when you are using a much finer grind size, the resistance for the water to flow through the coffee bean will be a lot higher as compared to a coarse grind size. So what's going to happen? Two scenarios. One, when it's way too fine, you're going to cause channeling, which is what you do not want to have when you are brewing your coffee. And the other one, when the contact time is way too long, you're going to cause a lot of bitterness. It will reduce the sweetness in your cup. Therefore, contact time will definitely impact the overall body and mouthfeel because of grind size, and also the overall sweetness, because with a prolonged period of contact time, you're going to introduce more bitterness, and hence the perceived sweetness in your cup will reduce. And for temperature, you'll affect two different aspects. One is acidity and the other one would be the flavor. If you are picking up very flat and dull acidity, where your acidity intensity is really low, you can consider to increase your temperature. It will definitely help. And as it comes to flavor, things like herbal notes, you can also consider to increase your temperature. So temperature plays a huge part when it comes to the acidity intensity and the profile, as well as the flavor profile. As a good start, I will recommend for washed coffee, you can use this range. As for the natural and natural anaerobic, you can use this range of temperature to kickstart. And based on that, you can make adjustments as accordingly. Okay, so all in all, you have to first understand what are the variables that you can control and play with. Of course, there are variables that we did not cover today, like your drippers, your filter paper, your water ppm and water content, things like that. We'll leave that for next time. But understanding what you can control will definitely help you to improve your brewing experience at home. And before this, you need to first learn how to assess the different aspects of coffee. By putting them together, you are able to make a better cup at home. These are all general guidelines for you. Feel free to play around with it and explore further. It doesn't work 100% of the time. There will still be variants here and there, but these are good guidelines for you to start with. Alright, I hope you enjoy your brewing. Thank you.